Interesting stuff there from Andy Dunn speaking to Joe on Wednesday Night Rugby. You can check out the full piece on youtube.com/offtheball. It's interesting that he mentions that what would have happened had Munster had a bit more patience with Rob Penny, or his plan would have been allowed to develop over the next few years. And I'm not sure, is that something you've considered recently, because it's, I suppose about 7 or 8 years ago, or more, over a decade at this point, before we were having this conversation.
Yeah, I think the way, obviously, when Rob Penny came in, he really tried to completely change the way Munster played, and you know, you had a lot of forwards kind of in the wider channels, and they were going wide a lot. And I know he was frustrated maybe when he left that they didn't persist with the change, and probably reverted to type a little bit after that. And then under, you know, Rassie Erasmus, obviously Axel took over after Rob Penny, and then Rassie Erasmus came in, and they kind of resorted to pressure game, really good kicking, trying to win the ball back from box kicks, and putting massive pressure on opposition. And Rassie still obviously continued with that kind of forward dominance type scenario for the World Cup, and had won him a World Cup with incredibly powerful men and stuff like that. It was interesting, I was listening to Chris Farrell after a press conference, and the stuff he was saying about the way they're trying to play, and that they're trying to be more expansive under Stephen Larkham. And the problem for them is they haven't been scoring enough of tries. You know, they've only 7 tries scored in Europe in the 4 games, which is low by their standards. They normally score a lot more than that, and they're not out-muscling forward packs, the opposition forward packs and stuff. So when you look back at the pool games, you know, getting a bonus point win against a really poor Ospreys side, they left it till the 83rd or 4th minute. It was great to get 5 points there, and the damage was done really with the draw against Racing. They put massive pressure on themselves with that draw in Limerick. They actually played really well. Their attack was superb that day. They made 10 or 11 line breaks. They just didn't convert those chances that they created. And then obviously the 2 Saracens games, which are, you know, Saracens chopped and changed for reasons around the salary cap, and they didn't use all their first team for each game. But they made it very, very difficult for Munster, and it was always going to be hard to score tries. I think allowing them a losing bonus point in Thomond Park, and then probably not getting one themselves in the away game, where they played very well. Yeah, that's where they're at. And
it's interesting actually, because you were in with us on Monday, and in many ways, obviously last Friday's game against Ulster is a warning shot almost for Munster fans, because you were saying on Monday that some of the players in certain positions just aren't good enough. And Ronan O'Gara this morning in the Irish Examiner, I might just go through like a paragraph here. Very interesting. He said there are some legacy issues Munster are still paying the price for. The reality, in my view, is that some people who don't know the club and the ethos put average players in positions of prominence and power. Lads who get called leaders, he puts in inverted commas. Let's call a spade a spade. If that's your leadership group, what message does that send to everyone else? So he's kind of going one step further. He's not just saying that there are players who aren't good enough in the team. He's saying that they're not good enough to be leaders within the group.
Yeah, it's. I suppose it's hard when you're talking about guys who, going back to our time, we had so much depth with the perceived second string that we had, the competitiveness in training. You know, we used to do lineouts against each other, and the 8 starters would be up against 8 top quality players who were really angry that they're not on the team, and we were blessed with the amount of depth we had there, and depth in quality. You know, guys who could easily make it in a lot of other teams, and some guys moved on at times who weren't getting regular starts for Munster. Recruited very well, and I suppose the same type of depth isn't there. And there's a lot of good young players coming through at Munster, particularly in the last 2-3 years. There's a lot more representation in the Ireland under-20, so there's optimism there that some young players will come through. But I think when you go into Europe, you need international standard players to win the competition right across the board, and Munster don't have enough of them. So it seems very disrespectful to say that guys are not good enough, but there's some areas that are weaker than others, and there is injuries, or if you just look at the last couple of weeks where there's been the World Cup players were pulled out for the 2 weeks, and there's no consistency in selection, and then you have injuries on top of that, and they've suffered over that, you know, where when I played, there was probably 10 to 15 guys away with Ireland all the time, and the second group were a very strong group. And I played in a lot of those because I didn't start for Ireland in all those games. I would have been an Irish squad member all the time, but I remember going back and you know, going away to Edinburgh on a Friday night and winning those matches, or going away to Cardiff on a Saturday and getting results, and being confident with the group around that there was a lot of experience and quality there. The same kind of depth isn't there, and I know there's a frustration probably with Munster fans that it's 8 years now since they won a trophy, and there's been a couple of transitional periods, and there's a bit of frustration there. And
where are they in comparison to where they were 8 years ago in terms of the distance between them and a trophy?
Well, I suppose getting to European Cup semi-finals the last number of years was, in my opinion, a very good achievement, because to win the competition, like I said, you need so much quality right across the board and so much depth. We've seen that with Leinster and Saracens and some of the big French teams, that they can change 15 players and bring in internationals. There's not many teams can do that. There's probably only 4 or 5 across Europe who can consistently make that kind of change. So I think with I was probably looking up some stuff in the last few days that there is a frustration there, and there is a sense that, do they need another little bit of time? You know, Damien Dialinde will come in next year, and what's the second one from South Africa? I'm gone blind.
Snyman.
Snyman, yeah, Snyman, yeah. They're world-class players. They'll come in and they will make him a lot stronger for sure. But I think just probably not producing enough of exciting, incredibly talented young players coming through at once. You know, you look at Leinster and the example with Ireland the last couple of years, where Porter, Levy, Larmour, James Ryan, all kind of four or five guys came through at once, straight into the Leinster side or straight into Ireland. That's an ideal scenario where you want to bring in young players. Some guys take longer than others to mature and to make that step up. But yeah, they're a bit away, you think, and I think if they got some sort of consistency in selection, that's really hampered them in the last couple of weeks. So I would say with all their players available, they're a good side. They're not a great side, a brilliant side. They're capable of beating anyone with their full strength side. But when they make those changes, they seem to have been hampered a little bit more so this year. So come the end of the season, will they make the playoffs for Pro 14? Yes. And are they capable of winning it? Yes, they are. Have they been in an incredibly tough group? For sure, because I know some people will say Saracens made those changes, but they've so much depth in their squad that they were still 2 good Saracen sides. There was opportunities. They won the game in Limerick and actually played quite well, Munster over in Saracens. But Saracens and Racing are two potential winners here, this competition. You know, Racing will go to 21 points or possibly 22 if they win on Sunday with a bonus point. Sarries will go to 15. And they'll play Racing in Alliance Park next week. They could go to 20, so it could finish Racing 21, 22, Saracens 20, and Munster, 17, 16, 17. So they have to win in Paris on Sunday. The 3 of them could be around 19, 20 then, which
it would make things very interesting.
It would make it really interesting. So it's a very tough group. So they're a bit away, but I wouldn't be as critical as some. I do agree with Rog in the sense that you have to deal in reality here. There's a lack of that top class international player right across the board, and they've had to make do with what they have in the last number of years. They've brought in a lot of players from outside the province, whether it be guys from Leinster or overseas players, and that's just the way it is. They haven't produced
It doesn't
enough
seem like
players.
that's going to be that decline in the homegrown talent within Munster is going to change.
Yeah, but no,
anytime soon.
I think there is some good young, very young, good young players that are coming through. As I said, there's a good number of guys. Ben Healy is a really exciting player.
Well,
Jake Flannery, Jack O'Sullivan, Gavin Coombs, Liam Coombs, Shane Daly. There is a lot of good young players, but I think they're probably not making that jump as quickly as the likes of Porter or Larmer or these guys, which is fine. So I think I'm trying to believe there's still another year or two in some of them to be really top-class players.
Why aren't they making the jump as quick then?
I don't know. I think it's a little bit down to numbers as well. When you have so much quality across the board and so many guys coming through at once, that the stats and the facts are that, you know, if you've 20 good young fellas, 4 or 5 of them will be really, really good. Sure. There'll be a next level of a little bit below. So it's just about maturity as well. And then you're probably putting, you know, if you put 4 or 5 into a team with 10, 11, 12 internationals at once, then they get brilliant. They play in the first team basically. And I've always said this, you know, when you bring young players into the team, an ideal scenario would be put 3 young fellas in with 12 top-class internationals, and then they're playing in the first team essentially, if you like, rather than 6 or 7 of them playing on the second string side, if you know what I mean, and struggling a little bit. So being part of a team that's fairly dominant, and then they can really grow in confidence and do something special, like we saw Larmer doing down in Limerick a couple of years ago. He's an incredible talent. So
just on this Sunday, Alan, it's looking like JJ is going to be fit for the game. Is that a big thing in your view, or were you kind of excited about the prospect of Ben Healy getting his opportunity in a big European game?
No, I think, to be fair to JJ Hanran, he's played really well this year, and he's got some consistency into his game. I felt devastated for him on a personal level that he didn't get that drop goal against Racing, because it would have done his confidence and his belief the world of good. But I think he's played really well. He's missed a couple of kicks here and there, but I think he's a very, very talented player. I think the issues he's had over the years is probably just control and confidence and self-belief in himself, and really to be a bit more confrontational and physical. But I think he's improved a lot, and I think he's kind of excelled in that role this year. So he has to start for me. But if he didn't start, I'd start Ben Healy, because I think then you're leaving Rory Scannell as a 12 and you're not making 2 to 3 changes for one position. But
and at the point you were just making there a moment ago, like, the players around you in the European night are far superior than, say, getting thrown in on a bad Pro 14 night, for example. And like, it's not the worst situation for a young fella to be thrown in to, especially given all the talents that we know that he has.
Yeah, for sure. And he is a very talented player. And for any young player, Owen, it's about confidence. You know, some guys will be really, really confident in themselves, and they'll have that temperament and mentality. But it's difficult. By and large, it's difficult for young players to step into any kind of hostile environment like that and excel. If things go well, if they start the game well, you know, they grow in confidence, they believe in themselves, and they enjoy themselves. But it's a very difficult one. So,
what's your gut feeling on this?
My gut feeling, it's very difficult for Munster to get a result, because it's probably that word cohesion that they've lacked in the last number of weeks. And when you go into big games like this, it's really good to go into them on the back of 2 or 3 really positive results, where you've won, or you've scored tries, or you've been really positive in the way you've played. They've had so much change throughout, you know, the Interpros. And people will say, look, the other provinces have had to deal with the same thing as well. But then the injuries, I think Tadhg Byrne and Joey Carberry are massive losses. You know, this time last year, Munster went to Gloucester, and it was a very tough game for them, and they were actually absolutely brilliant to get a bonus point win.
Carberry's moment of magic.
Yeah, and Byrne was really prominent, and, you know, Kilcoyne has been out injured for a few weeks. But then there's no hiding from the fact that some of the players have, you know, they were really, really poor. Their form was really, really poor in the last couple of weeks. So you'd imagine they'll be a lot better. They'll be more intent. There'll be more aggression. And I think Rog makes a very good point in his piece. Is, you know, they've got to be confrontational. They've got to roll the sleeves up here and be in for the fight, and stop Racing, because they're a very talented side, and if they get on the front foot, you know, Vakatawa, Teddy Tama, Imhoff, these guys can cause you all sorts of problems. So it's a really, they've amounted a climb really, but I'm hopeful that they can throw caution to the wind a little bit, and if they cut out the mistakes, I think it's been a recurring theme for them. In the last 7 games where they've only had 2 wins, they've had 1 draw against Racing, is just mistakes and taking their chances. Because like I said, they've got in really good positions and they just haven't been able to build a relentless kind of pressure. And you go back to a couple of years ago when they topped their pool, got to the semi-final when they were beaten by Saracens, topped the Pro 14, got to the final, they lost to Scarlets. There was a relentless kind of aggression and intensity about their rucking, about their carries, about, you know, even though they weren't that expansive, they were really good to watch. They just had a real tempo about them. They've had surges of that, but they just don't build the pressure when they get into the opposition 22, and they don't punish teams. So they make it easy. If you're a defending player, you know, you defend for 4 or 5 phases, and
you know you'll get away with it.
Ultimately there'll be a mistake or a knock-on, or there'll be a bit of a timing and a pass and stuff. So I think they've got to get a lot of stuff right on Sunday, which is a big ask.
Yeah, we won't get into Leinster this weekend at home to Leon, Ulster away to Claremont. I just want to get a quick word on Connacht against Toulouse tomorrow as well. Like, when you talk about being up against it, there's a province who's right up against it at the moment.
Yeah, they've Andy Friend is 9, I think it's 9 players back, which is a massive boost. He's been hampered in the last couple of weeks. You talk about maybe with Munster have struggled as well. Both those, Connacht lost their 3 games in the Interpro series, so they've really struggled as well. The injuries have been devastating for them, so they've 9 players back. I think having Jared Butler back, their captain, Fainga, Aki, Delan, Matt Healy, there's a raft of more players come back into the side. They're still, you know, Toulouse are a team that are not as, they were really poor on the road before. They've won in Connacht in the sports ground before, so they'll want to keep that win going. They're one of 4 teams who's won 4 out of 4, so it's a really daunting task for them. But I think Connacht, where they find themselves is they've got to win the last 2 with 2 bonus point wins. Montpellier next week they're out of the competition already, so you'd hope that maybe they'll pick a second string next week, and that Connacht can go and chase a bonus point win in France, which is something they're capable of doing, and that will bring them to 18 points. But it's a very, very difficult one. But the sports ground will be rocking tomorrow, I think, and they'll be baying for blood.
Without question. One comment in here from Lorcan O'Toole. Come on, the group had Sarries in disarray and Munster couldn't put their foot in their throats when the opportunity was there. Would have done the whole competition, especially Leinster, a favour.
Sarries in disarray is... yeah, there's some merit in what he's saying, for sure, but there was still a lot of internationals, a lot of quality in that Saracens side, and, you know, it was a much stronger side in Allianz Park in the second game. And Munster played really well. Munster capable of you know, getting stuck in, frustrating the opposition. It's just they need to score. It's like a striker in soccer. They've only scored 7 tries. They got a lifeline, there's no doubt. I agree with him. They got a lifeline with the salary cap stuff with Saracens. You know, I thought a full-strength Saracens team are capable of going anywhere on the road in Europe and winning. And, you know, Munster picked up those 4 points in Limerick, but they gave Saracens 1. The conditions were horrendous. You know, neither side could really play rugby, but you know, they did get a bit of a lifeline there. But the pool of death didn't turn out to be the complete pool of death, but they find themselves, as I said, the Saracens games weren't a problem. You win 3 home games in Europe and you win 1 on the road, well, you're up at 18, 19, 20 points then.
Yeah.
That's the problem. The draw against Racing was the problem here.
Certainly was. It seems that you're kind of... I'm just gauging your opinion here. It seems that Ulster and Leinster are going through, Munster and Connacht are crashing out.
Well, Ulster in a situation, they have 17 points, so they can effectively, they're away to Claremont, which is really tough. A losing bonus point would be a great result there, but they've Bath next week at home, so if they get a bonus point win against Bath and didn't get anything in France, they end up with 22 points, so they're going through.
Yeah.
Connacht have a slight chance. You know, Leinster will probably, you know, Leinster will win 6 out of 6 because they've Leon at home, and and Benetton away next week. So it's yeah, maybe only one win this weekend from the Irish provinces, I think.
Well, we'll be set up for a nice
Hopefully
surprise.
we're wrong. Hopefully we're wrong.
Exactly. We'll be set up for a nice surprise on Monday if you are wrong. Alan, thanks a million for popping in. Enjoy the weekend's rugby. It is 8:09 on this Friday morning. Brendan Menton will be joining us at around 8:20 this morning to chat about the FAI. We're back with the top stories this morning right after this.